Landfall Games has carved out a niche for their uniquely hilarious games, and is most known for their Totally Accurate series. I've already covered Totally Accurate Battlegrounds, which was quite a time. As for Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, it released in alpha back in 2016, but recently got its full release, so I figured now would be a great time to see what all the hype is about. I hopped into the campaign mode to see what kind of strategic action I was in for. There's different campaigns made up of a variety of different eras and challenges that you progress through. Even though the game looks derpy, which I love by the way, the levels are designed in a way to make strategic use of your unit composition. You can see the enemies' units and where they're placed before the battle starts, so you have to make use of several unit types to exploit the weaknesses in the enemy's army. You have a limited amount of points that you use to build up your army before you battle. The weaker units cost less and the stronger units cost more, but often battles require a variety of unit types to succeed. You can only place your units behind your red line, meaning that positioning and what types of units you use are the two biggest factors in the outcome of battles. You can put units on top of buildings or trees as long as they're in your zone, which makes them impossible to kill sometimes. I'm not sure why that's an option, but it's certainly useful and funny to watch when it works. You can take as long as you want to find and place your units, meaning the game always lets you play at your own pace. If you fail a battle, you just retry and experiment with new units and placement. Once you place your troops in a formation and start the battle, you can roam around like an omnipotent god, watching the chaos in your sandbox unfold. One feature that was a welcome surprise was the ability to possess any of your units during battle. Once you possess a unit, you can move them around and attack with them. Most units have 1 to 3 attacks that are on a cooldown timer. They're not stronger because you possess them or anything, but it definitely gives you a bit of an edge because you're smarter than the often reckless AI. I used this mechanic here and there whenever I got tired of just watching the battles, or when the battle was close and I felt like I could swing the battle in my favor by taking control of one of the more powerful units. It's also just fun to try out different units to see how they play. The reckless AI is part of what makes the game both fun and funny. The ranged troops have no regard for their team, so they'll often hit each other if they're in the line of fire. Even though I had never played before, the units are well designed in their aesthetics. You can intuitively figure out what they will do based on what they're wearing and what weapons they have, at least for the less fictional ones. This makes each faction easier to learn since you can figure out the properties of a unit most of the time, like these guys with hay around them, so you know they can block arrows. I still wish there could be a short description of what each unit did when you hover your mouse over it, since some of the unit's attacks are random feeling, like this longship that just jumps on the enemy for some reason. It's nothing you can't learn over time though. The sheer amount of units is what keeps the different campaigns interesting and varied all the way through. Some campaigns only give you access to a specific faction or factions, while others give you access to most or all of the units at once. I preferred the campaigns that only let you pick from one or a few factions at a time, as they felt more calculated and methodical. Because of the ridiculous amount of unit types and factions, it's hard to come up with a real strategy of which units to use, because there's endless combinations you can make with the larger pools of units. Eventually you familiarize yourself with all of the units and start to have favorites for certain scenarios, but it is pretty overwhelming at first. The nearly endless strategy and experimentation of units is what makes the game infinitely replayable though, especially in sandbox mode where you can spawn in as many of whatever kinds of units you want for both sides, though it has to be within reason if you don't want your game to run like this. Disgusting! I also tried out the multiplayer mode. The matchmaking takes forever, most likely because you get to pick from a large selection of maps. I found it to be much less strategic since both players can see what the other one is putting down, and both players have to ready up to start the fight. It would be a lot more fun if there was a countdown timer before the battle started, as you would be swapping in and out units based on your opponent, leading to a hectic back and forth full of mind games. The map should also be randomized instead of giving players all those choices, which would help to speed up matchmaking. The environments in the game are really varied and beautiful. There's tons of different themes to them that match up to the different faction types in the game. It's always satisfying watching the battles unfold and seeing scattered bodies everywhere from the physics-based combat. Each environment has a fitting soundtrack, and I love the little screams you hear during combat as well. There's unlockables hidden around some of the maps, like a few new campaigns and a bunch of secret and legacy faction units. You find these by free roaming the camera around the environment to search for suspicious objects, which then unlock units. You can then use the unlockable units in future battles if it's one of the factions you can choose from, as well as play through the new campaigns. Totally Accurate Battle Simulator may or may not be a very accurate battle simulator, but it is a very good strategy game with a surprisingly long series of campaign levels. There's tons of variety in the campaigns because of the ridiculous amount of unit types and levels designed to get you to think about how you need to approach every battle with your selection of units. The multiplayer could use some more work, but the campaigns are extensive enough to make up for it. The new units you're faced against constantly have you adapting and learning new strategies. It's a surprisingly deep game that appeals to both casual gamers who just want to experiment with wacky over-the-top battles, but also lends itself to people who are willing to learn about all of the game's units and how they interact with one another. I'm generally not a big fan of strategy games, but Totally Accurate Battle Simulator is one that exceeded my expectations. I'm sure I'll be coming back to it as it gets updates. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe to see more videos like this in the future.